The wind cut across the open field like a blade, sharp and unforgiving, bending the dry grass flat against the frozen soil. Thomas Walker stood beside the single fence line that marked the edge of his land, his breath rising in slow white clouds as Christmas lights flickered weakly on the porch behind him. One bulb blinked out, then another, as if even the house was tired of pretending things were whole. His gloves were worn thin at the palms. He tightened his grip on the wooden post anyway, feeling the vibration of the wind pass through it and into his bones. This fence had been his father's pride, straight, strong, built to last. Tonight, one section leaned inward, loosened by time and neglect, mirroring the quiet unraveling Thomas tried not to name. Beyond the field, the horizon was dark, heavy with winter clouds. No glow, no promise, just the long curve of land disappearing into uncertainty. Christmas Eve had arrived, but peace had not. Inside the barn, a lantern burned low, its light trembling with each gust. Thomas had meant to fix the hinge weeks ago. He had meant to sit down with the numbers again. He had meant to pray longer, listen harder, trust deeper. But discipline without direction had slowly drained him, and clarity slipped away like frost on old boards. Debt notices lay folded in his coat pocket, unopened but fully known. The land taxes, the equipment loan, the quiet math that refused to change no matter how honest a man tried to be. Leadership felt heavier this winter. Responsibility had teeth. A distant cow lowed softly, unsettled by the wind shift. Thomas looked toward the sound, then up toward the dark sky. He did not ask for wealth. He did not ask for ease. He only whispered a tired, almost wordless prayer for direction, for a sign that endurance still mattered. Snow began to fall, light at first, then steady. But it didn't start there, and we must go back a little in time. 6 months earlier, the morning still carried warmth, and the land breathed easier under the southern sun. Thomas Walker woke before daylight out of habit more than alarm, his body trained by decades of responsibility. The house was quiet then, resting in that gentle space between night and obligation. He sat at the edge of the bed, boots already waiting where he had left them. Margaret still slept, one hand curled near her face, calm even in rest. Thomas paused there longer than usual, letting gratitude surface without words. Stability, he believed, began in moments like this, choosing to notice what still remained whole. Outside, mist hovered low over the pasture, lifting slowly as the first pale light touched the horizon. The wide curved path leading from the house to the barn glistened with dew, bending gently through the land like a question still being answered. Thomas walked it with steady steps, breathing in the smell of soil and hay, grounding himself in routine. Routine had always been his anchor. The old oak tree near the fence line stood tall and unmoved, its thick roots pressing deep into the earth. His father had planted it when Thomas was just a boy, saying little, but meaning everything. "This land will outlast moods and markets," his father once said, "but only if the man tending it has clarity." Clarity. That word had guided Thomas for years. He fed the cattle, checked the water troughs, adjusted a loose gate hinge with practiced hands. Discipline flowed naturally, not forced, not heroic, just faithful repetition. Stewardship wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. And honesty had always felt like enough. Later that morning, Margaret joined him at the kitchen table, coffee steaming between them. Papers lay neatly stacked near Thomas's elbow. Bills, statements, numbers that no longer felt neutral. "You don't have to carry it alone," she said gently, not accusing, not pressing. "I know," Thomas replied, though his eyes stayed on the page. Direction had begun to blur, but pride kept him quiet. A leader, he believed, absorbed pressure so others didn't have to. Still, the strain had started showing itself in small ways. Repairs postponed, conversations shortened, prayer reduced to habit instead of listening. The fence line near the east pasture sagged slightly where a post had rotted underground, unseen but weakening the whole stretch. One afternoon, standing near that fence, Thomas noticed how the land sloped away toward the horizon. Sunlight broke through the clouds in thin bands, almost hopeful. For a moment, clarity returned. Not answers, but resolve. He rested his hand on the post, feeling the strength that still held. "I'll figure this out," he said quietly, more promise than certainty. At that time, Christmas still felt far away, and Thomas still believed discipline alone would be enough. Thomas had never dreamed of expansion or recognition. His vision was quieter than that, slower, deeper, shaped by years of watching what endured and what failed. He believed real success was measured in continuity, not applause. If the land could remain steady in his hands and eventually pass to the next generation without bitterness or debt, that felt like victory enough. Late one evening, after the heat had finally broken, Thomas walked the wide, curved path again, this time with a seed bag slung over his shoulder. The weight rested familiar against his back, a reminder that growth always required patience before proof. He stopped beneath the old oak tree, its leaves whispering softly as the wind shifted direction. This tree had watched over every season of his adulthood. It had shaded his father, then him. Its branches carried no hurry, no anxiety, just presence. Thomas leaned against the trunk and closed his eyes. His prayer came quietly, not dramatic, not desperate, more like an offering than a request. "Lord, I don't need more," he murmured. "I need clarity, direction. Show me how to lead well when the numbers don't make sense." He stayed there longer than planned, breathing slowly, letting stillness do its work. Somewhere nearby, the cattle grazed calmly, untroubled. Still water glimmered in the trough, unbroken by movement. For a brief moment, spiritual peace settled over him, fragile but real. An insight arrived without sound. Stewardship isn't proven in abundance. It's revealed in restraint. Thomas straightened, feeling something align inside him. Emotional maturity, he had learned, wasn't about feeling strong. It was about choosing consistency even when confidence wavered. His long-term vision sharpened, not toward escape, but toward endurance. That night at dinner, he spoke more openly with Margaret. "I don't want shortcuts," he said, "even if they solve things fast." She nodded, her eyes steady. "Integrity has never been fast," she replied, "but it lasts." Later, alone in the barn, Thomas lit the lantern and reviewed the accounts again. The numbers hadn't changed, the pressure remained, but his purpose had found its footing once more. Christmas was still months away, and Thomas believed, perhaps too confidently, that holding to purpose would be enough to carry him through whatever came next. Autumn arrived quietly, then stayed longer than expected. The heat gave way to damp mornings and restless winds that carried more questions than relief. Thomas noticed the change first in his body, the way fatigue lingered even after rest, the way discipline no longer produced peace, only momentum without meaning. Frozen soil came early that year, too early. He stood in the field one morning, boots sinking slightly into ground that should have been firm. The rope trailing behind the old plow dragged unevenly, catching on clumps of earth that refused to yield. Thomas adjusted his grip, jaw tight, pulling harder than necessary, as if effort alone could correct the season. It couldn't. Inside him, clarity thinned. Focus fractured into smaller and smaller pieces until even simple decisions felt heavier than they should. Numbers blurred. Days overlapped. Prayer shortened again, not out of disbelief, but exhaustion. Discipline was no longer enough without direction. One afternoon, a hard wind rattled the barn doors loose. Thomas stepped inside to secure them and noticed the broken section of fence near the east pasture had worsened. The post had finally split at the base, leaning at an angle that threatened the entire line. He stared at it longer than necessary, aware of the symbolism but unwilling to admit it. Boundaries, once firm, were softening. A thought crept in. Subtle, strategic, dangerous. There are ways to fix this faster. The idea wasn't sinful in appearance, just convenient. Delay a payment here. Accept help from someone with conditions attached. Bend a principle quietly, temporarily. No one would be harmed. Leadership, the voice whispered, sometimes required flexibility. Thomas turned away from the fence, unsettled. Integrity, he knew, often cost more than convenience ever could, but inner strength weakens first in silence. That night, he sat alone at the kitchen table long after Margaret had gone to bed. The lantern burned low. Papers lay open now, unavoidable. The numbers told a story he didn't want to read, one of narrowing margins and approaching deadlines. He pressed his hands flat against the table and bowed his head, not in eloquent prayer, but in surrender. "I don't know how much longer I can hold this," he admitted quietly. Outside, the wind shifted again, colder now. A cow stirred in the pasture, uneasy, sensing what the weather would bring. Thomas felt it too, not fear exactly, but the awareness that a deeper test was forming. This trial wasn't about money alone. It was about whether his purpose would survive pressure or fracture beneath it. The offer arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, carried not by mail, but by a man who smiled too easily. Caleb Harmon stepped out of his truck near the barn, boots polished, coat clean, eyes sharp with calculation. He had recently acquired several struggling properties across the county, moving quickly where others hesitated. People called him efficient, strategic, forward-thinking. Thomas called him something else, careful. "I heard you might be looking for some breathing room," Caleb said, glancing across the fields as if already measuring them for himself. Times like these required decisive action. They stood near the fence line, the broken post still unrepaired. The wind stirred dust at their feet. Thomas noticed how Caleb avoided looking at it directly. Caleb's proposal sounded reasonable at first, a short-term partnership, immediate cash, equipment access. In return, partial control of the land's output, and a clause that allowed expansion later, should circumstances worsen. "It's temporary," Caleb assured him. "Just business. No one has to know the details." Thomas felt the weight of it settle in his chest. Financial strain pressed hard now, not abstract, but personal. The bills, the deadlines, Christmas approaching without margin or celebration. "What happens if I say no?" Thomas asked. Caleb's smile thinned. "Then someone else will say yes, and I can't guarantee your situation won't become more difficult." That night, Thomas barely slept. Leadership had never demanded so much at once. Responsibility now meant choosing between survival and stewardship, between relief and long-term purpose. Margaret listened quietly as he explained the offer the next morning. "It solves the problem," Thomas said, rubbing his temples. "At least for now." "And later?" she asked softly. He didn't answer. The silence did. Over the next weeks, pressure mounted. A payment deadline passed without extension. Equipment malfunctioned at the worst possible moment. Caleb returned twice more, each time more insistent, each time framing integrity as stubbornness. "This isn't about right or wrong," Caleb said during their final meeting. "It's about reality." Thomas looked toward the horizon. Then, clouds hung low, but a faint line of light pressed against their edge. He felt something steady rise within him, not confidence, but resolve. "This land was entrusted to me," he said, "not leveraged." Caleb's expression hardened. "Then don't expect mercy when the numbers catch up." And they did. Within days, Thomas received notice of foreclosure proceedings beginning. Word traveled quickly. Sympathy was quiet, help scarce. The injustice wasn't loud. It was procedural, efficient, impersonal. Thomas repaired the fence line himself that weekend, driving the new post deep into stubborn ground. Each strike of the hammer felt like a declaration. Boundaries mattered, even now, even if they cost him everything. Winter advanced with quiet authority. Fields rested beneath pale frost, and the land seemed to hold its breath. Thomas moved through his days with steady restraint, doing what remained to be done, though the future no longer belonged to him in any visible way. Caleb Harmon, meanwhile, moved quickly. He expanded aggressively, acquiring more properties than the season could reasonably support. His confidence grew louder as his caution thinned. Where Thomas measured twice, Caleb trusted momentum. Where Thomas maintained boundaries, Caleb pressed them outward. By mid-December, the shift began. One of Caleb's newly acquired parcels failed inspection due to unresolved soil contamination. Another faced legal dispute over improper transfer. Equipment he had rushed into service broke down under frozen conditions. Costs stacked faster than projections allowed. None of this reached Thomas directly. He heard fragments at the feed store. Brief mentions passed between men who spoke carefully. No satisfaction rose in him, only confirmation of a truth his father had taught him long ago. Character outlasts cleverness. On a gray afternoon, Thomas crossed paths with Caleb outside the county office. The man looked smaller somehow, tired. The polish was gone. "You were right to hold your ground," Caleb muttered, not meeting Thomas's eyes. "Timing turned against me." Thomas nodded, not in agreement, but acknowledgement. There was no triumph here, only consequence. As Christmas approached, Thomas's situation remained unresolved. The foreclosure date stood firm. The house felt quieter now, not from despair, but acceptance. He and Margaret spoke more, not less. Gratitude found room again, not for outcomes, but for presence. One evening, Thomas stood beneath the old oak tree, snow dusting its roots. He placed a gloved hand against the bark, steady and unmoved. "If this is where it ends," he whispered, "let it end clean." The wind passed through the branches, gentle this time. Somewhere nearby, an animal moved calmly, unafraid. Stillness returned, not as relief, but as trust. Christmas Eve arrived with no promise of reversal, only faith. Christmas morning arrived quietly, without announcement or spectacle. Snow lay thin across the fields, softening edges, muting sharp lines. The storm that had threatened through the night had passed, leaving behind a rare stillness, the kind that feels intentional. Thomas woke before dawn, as always. For a moment, the weight returned instinctively. Then he noticed the silence, not emptiness, peace. He stepped outside, pulling his coat tight, and followed the wide, curved path toward the barn. The horizon held a faint glow now, gold pressing gently against the dark, patient and sure. A wind shift moved across the land, warmer than the days before, carrying something unfamiliar, expectancy. Inside the barn, the lantern cast steady light. The cattle stood calm, one heifer resting easily after weeks of unease. Thomas paused beside her, hand settling on her flank. She breathed slow and even. He felt it then, not relief, but reassurance. His phone vibrated in his pocket. The call came from a number he didn't recognize. He almost let it go. Discipline told him to answer. "Mr. Walker," the voice said, formal but unguarded. "This is the Regional Agricultural Trust. We've been reviewing cases involving predatory expansion practices." Thomas closed his eyes. The explanation followed, measured and precise. Caleb Harmon's aggressive acquisitions had triggered an audit. Contracts voided, assets frozen. Several properties were being reassigned to original stewards under revised terms, including debt restructuring and immediate relief. "You qualify," the voice said, "effective today." Thomas leaned against the stall rail, steadying himself. The miracle didn't arrive with thunder. It came with correction, with justice, with timing only God could orchestrate. By the time the call ended, the sun had cleared the horizon. Gold spilled across the fields, warming frost into mist. The old oak tree stood bathed in light, unchanged yet affirmed. Margaret met him at the porch, eyes searching his face. "It's over," he said quietly. "We're staying." She didn't speak. She simply held him, gratitude flowing without words. As the morning unfolded, neighbors stopped by, cautious at first, then sincere. News traveled fast now, not of loss but restoration, not luck but alignment. Thomas returned once more to the fence line. The repaired post stood firm, boundaries intact, integrity rewarded, not because it demanded payment, but because it endured. He lifted his face toward the warming light. God never arrives late. Leadership begins the moment a man chooses integrity over relief. Those who hold their boundaries when pressure rises discover that character carries them further than cleverness ever could. Often, God strengthens a man in silence long before he blesses him in public. Those who plant in faith, even in frozen ground, harvest clarity when the season turns. And the gifts that matter most are rarely placed in our hands. They are formed quietly within us. Thomas Walker did not receive wealth that morning. He received confirmation, and that was the Christmas gift his spirit had been waiting for. If this story touched something quiet inside you, it's because it wasn't just about Thomas. It was about every season when discipline felt heavy, clarity felt distant, and integrity seemed too costly to keep. Moments like these are not wasted. They are where character is forged, where leadership is refined, and where purpose quietly matures beneath pressure. This channel exists for those moments, for men and women who choose long-term vision over shortcuts, inner strength over applause, and faith over fear. Each story here is crafted to restore focus, awaken discernment, and remind you that God's timing is never rushed and never late. If you're seeking wisdom that steadies you, stories that strengthen your spirit, and reflections that help you lead your life with integrity and clarity, subscribe to the channel now. You're not here by accident. And don't stop here. The next story waiting on your screen will take you even deeper, into another season, another test, and another reminder that what God is building in you matters more than what you're trying to escape.